conversation, Kapil, by try and ask you to introduce the topic to us, right? So when we look at the chemical industries, what is the meaning of this entire transition towards net zero for companies operating in that space? If you can help us understand that, and what are also the key challenges that are typically faced by companies operating in that space?
Thanks, Sudheer. First of all, would like to thank Economic Times for creating such an important platform and also inviting me over from chemical industry to share some thoughts on the net zero. The hotly discussed topic, not even in India, but also globally. In fact, just 2 days back, I was with the Department of Chemical and Petrochemical and Bureau of Energy Efficiency people from the SOCHM platform, and we had discussed about CBAM very extensively and how is it going to pan out. Now, once we are talking about the CBAM, it also becomes very important that while we are talking about the Indian chemical industry, the journey towards the net zero then starts from there on. The most important challenge which we face in India is that we are totally dependent on the fossil fuels for the chemical industry. I also am a part of the chloralkali industry where we also manufacture caustic soda and chlorine, which is very highly energy intensive. All of us have captive power plants, which are basically coal-based or natural gas-based. So hence, carbon becomes an integral part of our manufacturing. So this is the most important challenge, Sudheer, which we face in India, that the basic molecules are energy intensive. We have to either depend on our own captive sources or going on the grid. And again, majority, as I said, 98% of the power which we are consuming in the chemical sector is coming from the fossil fuels only. So hence it becomes very important that how do we go towards a net zero. So that's one of the first most important challenge. Second, obviously, the dependence on fossil fuels. We can't wish it away right now. That's why when Ranjit was talking about 2060, 2070 achieving net zero for the country, now, and probably our Prime Minister knew that we are dependent on the fossil fuels, so hence he has taken a bit realistic target, I would say. The third part which was discussed in the session before the fire chat was on the technological limitations and all the economical viability. Now, that's a very true part. One of the colleague talked about the funds which should be there for the startups. Many people approach me, they must have also been approaching other people also in the industry, with some of their interesting projects for capturing carbon, eliminating carbon, reducing carbon emissions. However, where I see them struggling is the economical viability. They don't get funds at the proper time. And I've seen many people not been able to scale up. Though Shailesh talked about the part that some of the funding they are making available, is there for the startups. But still, I think there are far and few efforts there, and I would really advocate the venture capitalists to really come out with an ecosystem where we can have a lot of funds available for interesting startup where we can really reduce the carbon emissions. The other challenge, which is the cross-border carbon leakage. This is the latest we talked about, talked about subject. An example is that in Europe, if they want to reduce the carbon emissions, they just close down the plant there and shift it to Vietnam, Indonesia, or India, or China, anywhere else. And that's carbon leakage. You are just not producing yourself, you are just saying we have taken control, we have reduced carbon emission, but the equivalent carbon is getting emitted somewhere else. So that's not the real solution for it. So this is another challenge that you can have plants closed on at one place and located somewhere else, but that's not the solution. And then obviously there are chemical plants, they need to run for 24 hours. They need to have continuous energy. The reason fluoroalkali industry in India went for captive power plants was because there was no constant supply from the grids. There used to be blackouts in various places. Even in my flagship product, which is fluoropolymers, we have continuous processes. We also have ovens which are running for very high price products. Now, if there is energy breakdown, then the losses can be huge in terms of ovens closing down and the product not getting sintered or cured for the cycle it has. So there are a lot of challenges before we really start the journey for net zero.
Okay, thank you. So you're talking about a lot of challenges there, you're talking about a lot of problems. You're talking about the nature of supply, which basically is thermal. You're talking about the quantity or the quality of supply, which is, you're referring to disruptions there. You're also talking about carbon leakage, so a lot of big problems. Now, if I were to, let's try and be slightly optimistic there. Where does the solution lie, right? For example, on the aspect about thermal, there is a parallel revolution happening in the C&I space, the commercial and industrial space, in the solar power sector, right? What happens in the chemical industry? Do we, how can we gain from that, for example?
Yes, they're very interesting. My own sister concern, Inox Wind. It is one of the leading manufacturer of the wind turbines, and we also have the wind energy generation also in our own, one of our other sister concern, Inox Green. So this is one example that we ourselves are heading towards the renewable energy. So that's one part. However, there were challenges earlier also in the wind energy sector. Some of those challenges have been overcome now, and Suzlon and Inox Wind and a couple of other companies now have started, getting more projects, meaningful projects. We have also changed the technologies. They're gone for, wind turbines which are generating 3 megawatt, 4 megawatt, whereas once upon a time only few kilowatts in 90s they used to be there. So that's one part of the renewable energy. The other is that all of us, first of all, before we shift to the renewable energy part, we have to first understand that we all need to go for science-based targets. The entire goal is that we need to have global warming and the temperature rise limited to 1.5 degrees centigrade from where we were a couple of decades back. So to achieve that, it's very important that we have step-by-step science-based targets where we first evaluate scope 1, scope 2 for our life cycle assessments. What are our own carbon footprints? So once we have the carbon footprints known, then that calculation starts. But how do we adopt to the scope 1 reductions? That for in my case, if I have a captive power plant which is using coal, so that's the first scope 1 for me, that how do I shift from coal-based power plant to something like wind power, solar power, or even think about a green hydrogen kind of a situation when the whole economics become viable in those kind of sectors. So next is the scope 2 part. How do I really work with the grid, and how does the grid work in trying to take the power from the renewable energy sector, and then obviously supply to us less carbon footage. So that's the second step which has to be taken. Now, this is very challenging. I can definitely find a scope 1 reduction, but scope 2 reduction is something I'm dependent on the national policies, grids. That's where the vision from the government comes into picture, that we are talking about 2060 or 2070 as a net zero target for us. So investment which are going to come in India on these sectors, 500 gigawatt by 2030. It looks simple, but it's not simple, because I am involved myself in with some of my products going into EVs, going into green hydrogen, going into solar panel also, and I can see a lot of challenges those guys are facing. So if we are able to achieve that target of 500 gigawatt by 2030, that solves partially some of the problems. Now think about the next problem. We have solar power, we have wind energy, but solar power does not run for 24 hours. Wind drafts are not there available for all through the seasons everywhere. So what happens, you are producing energy in some time, you are not producing energy in some time. So how does it compensate? So that's where some of the big companies in India are talking about putting up huge storages. And those are basically sodium ion based storages, lithium ion based storages, and talking about, so if those storages are in place, that's when the renewable energy sector also comes kicking in alive. Otherwise, we can have investments, they might not partially give you whatever you want. So parallelly, some other investments also have to come. That's where this storage of energy, which is thought about by Reliance and Adani and a couple of other companies, is going to play a very, very pivotal role, very important role for future of our renewable energy to come. So these are some of the baby steps which are being taken going towards the net zero. And lastly comes the scope 3. Now scope 3 is something where I am dependent on the entire supply chain, my own procurement, my people traveling by cars, which are again fossil fuel based, flying by air, again fossil fuel based. So fine, those are still small in calculations, but my supply chain, or I am a scope 3 for my customers abroad. So I have to reduce my carbon footprints. My suppliers have to reduce their carbon footprints for me to get the scope 3 reductions in carbon emissions. Now that is the most challenging part. However, some of the steps which my kind of a company is taking is, they are also going to our supply chain, training them on their own scope 1 and scope 2 reduction, so that my scope 3 can come down. I was with one of the customers in Germany last year. He was showing his carbon footprint. He showed that from 2019 to 2023, scope 1, scope 3, he was able to almost bring down by 90%. But scope 3, he was able to bring down only by 10% in the last 4 years' time. So that's the most challenging part. So going towards net zero, these are the solutions that we need to have, Sudheer, the scope 1, scope 2, reduce down, go towards the renewable energy sector, have proper storages with us, train our scope 3 supply chain partners, and I think our journey, once it starts, then we can go faster, and as Ranjit was saying, probably 2070, 2060 also can be enhanced.
Okay, if I can quickly ask one more question, Kapil. So there is this famous, this famous argument or trend these days where, particularly in the investors community, where they're saying that, what used to be a green premium until some time back has now turned into a green discount, right? Which basically means that the switch towards greener technologies or processes, etc., has become not just become less costly, but it's also generating value, right? Now, my question to you is, what is the scenario like in your industry, in the chemicals industry? Suppose you want to switch over to a cleaner fuel. How does it work out purely from the point of view of economics? Is it more costly? Is it or if you can recoup the total cost over a lifetime of the plant? How does it work out?
See, so that's a very interesting and a very important question, because a lot here, Sudhir, depends on the policies from the government side also. So in our country, what happens is, if I am generating energy through solar or through renewable, through wind, I have to sell it first to the grid, and then the grid has to give it to me as bilateral agreement. So it does not come at a cheap cost. It still costs me almost the same, or some small concessions. Second part is that there are still cesses which are available on any transportation of energy to the grid to us. So those taxes and cesses again make it not a very viable solution. The energy in India is still not under GST net. We have to pay GST and then GST, there is no input credit for that. Though there was, I saw some flash news during the election results that probably natural gas may come under GST ambit. But I mean, that's something we have been talking to the ministries, advocating to them that energy, natural gas should come under GST so that we have input credits. So that's one part. The second part is that if we are putting up some big source of energy with us, if I consume it directly, it will be cheaper. Definitely it will be cheaper. But if it has to go to grid, if the government has to again give it back to us, there are transmission losses, there are other taxes, there are other things, and government wants their own profits, there are so many other challenges. So this is where it is really not making it viable in India. Whereas if we go to Europe or other places, we see, or even China, we see that a lot of solar panels across on the roofs of everyone's house, all the government buildings. You go to Europe, in all open spaces there are wind farms, and all those become a source of supply for the industry over there. And so for them to shift to total green is becoming very easy. There are a lot of my customers abroad who are totally green. But it's because the government policies are encouraging that. Over here, we really need to sit with the Ministry of Power and other ministries to understand that how we can make this green energy a very, very viable solution. The first meeting which I had was day before yesterday, I was telling you, and Bureau of Energy Efficiency from Ministry of Power is now really thinking about all these parameters. I hope that these things come very fast so that the green energy can be a very viable solution. Plus, obviously, the government has to give some incentives to the green energy. They have to really come up with some incentive for solar power, for green hydrogen. There are a lot of incentives which have been announced by government for National Green Hydrogen Mission. So I think if they fructify fast, we definitely will see some very, very interesting, viable solutions, and that can hasten our progress towards a net zero path.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.